dear viewers. This is Future Africa. I'm Anwar Khalil, and I'll be joined by a nuclear physicist from the Republic of South Africa. And he is Dr. Kelvin Kemm, a nuclear physicist and also Chief Executive Officer of Stratec Business Strategy Consultants, a project management company based in Pretoria, the Republic of South Africa. He is part of the Stratec Nuclear Consortium, which is developing the HTMR-100 nuclear reactor. He carries out business strategy development and project planning in a wide variety of fields. Thank you, Doc, for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Anwar. It's a pleasure to be talking to you.
Well, let's begin by my first question. Do you think Africa is independent in real terms?
Well, you know, for a couple of centuries now, Africa was a colonial power in the past, right? And that is understandable at the time. At the time, Europe discovered Africa, and the European countries then went on a scramble to grab pieces of land. When they took pieces of land, they labeled them with European, some part belonged to the Congo and some part belonged to England and some part belonged to Portugal and so on. They didn't take into account the natural ethnic differences that already existed. They just drew boundaries wherever they wanted to. So they drew boundaries that still exist today, of course, around the African countries. You find that African countries are very, very, very big in comparison to European countries. If you take South Africa, for example, South Africa is the same size as the whole of Western Europe added together. The distance from Pretoria, which is where I am now, the capital of South Africa, down to Cape Town in the far south, is the same distance as Rome to London. Now, this is not understood. So what happens is there's so many solutions today that are proposed in European countries. They say, we've got it right, you should do it our way. They come up with cell phone networks, they come up with power networks, they come up with road plans, all sorts of plans like that. And you find a country like Germany, for example, there 50 kilometers is quite a long way and 100 kilometers is a very long way. Here, that is your back garden. And so the mentality is different. So it's completely wrong for European people to come here and say they have an answer, we must do it their way. It's also equally wrong for African leaders to listen to that. What you should be doing is listening to what they have to say, because there's a lot of things they get right, and then taking what they say, let us now use our brains to adapt this to fit our circumstances. I mean, here in Ethiopia, like in South Africa, there's a lot of dust. It's dry in many regions. You've got some famous, very dry regions there. It's not like that in Germany, France. There they have endless water all over the place, and they tend to have a problem of draining land. They don't have big desert regions and stretches. So we've had cases here of buying something like a pump that comes into South Africa and is guaranteed waterproof. We put it in a dry area and it breaks in no time because dust has got into it and acted like liquid sandpaper, and the pump's broken because it isn't dustproof. It might be waterproof. But we don't want a waterproof pump in the desert. We want a dustproof pump in the desert. So one of the things that has been lacking in Africa is African leaders saying, let us get our intelligentsia and get them to come up with solutions, and we do that. One must be very careful of governments trying to implement their plans themselves. There's a huge difference between a government type of thinking and a private enterprise type of thinking. And it's terribly important to realize this difference. We have the same problem in South Africa in many respects. It's not unique to other people. And quite often government ministers with the best of intentions say, I've got this grand plan, we're going to do this. We're now going to do it my way and I'm going to guide it. And then it doesn't work. Because there's a lot more to building a dam or building a freeway or building a railway network, that the people who actually build these things, they understand them. A couple of years ago, I had a very interesting lunch with an Ethiopian gentleman in Mauritius. We sat and we talked, and he told me of some of the amazing things that are going on in Ethiopia, putting helicopters together and this and that and road construction. I was terribly impressed because there were things that he told me that I didn't know about. And again, he was saying, those fellows that are doing that, they know what they need. And we so often find that, if anything, government people stand in the way of the private enterprise. And that is a big problem. And I would say for Ethiopia, I've never been to your country. I'd love to visit Ethiopia. It's the one country in Africa that was never colonized. There's some terribly interesting history about Ethiopia. Old buildings that go back to the time of Christ and things like this, which I find is fascinating. So Ethiopian culture is not new. It's been there a very long time. And so a lot of independent attitude must have developed. There must have been some terribly intelligent people there 2,000 years ago.
Since recently, Africa as a continent and the Horn of Africa as a region is attracting much greater attention from different Western and Eastern powers, and from Asia and also the Western powers. Politically and military engagements are there, and there are bases in the Horn of Africa. Why do you think all these are happening to Africa?
Well, Africa is internationally very important. There's a lot of minerals, there's a lot of things here that people in other parts of the world are aware of. So they know very well you can't not take Africa into account. Africa has had a very high growth rate in the world as a region for some time now. Okay, it's coming off a low base, but nevertheless, there's a long way to go. The market in Africa is phenomenal. You're not going to sell very many more motor cars in Europe. You're not going to sell very many more motor cars in Japan or the United States, but you can sell very many more motor cars in Africa. There are people here without cars. The same goes for television sets and this and this. So if you look over the next 10, 20, 50, 60, 70 years, you say, where is a major market growth likely to happen? And the answer is Africa is waiting for it to happen. So it's not unreasonable that the Western world and the United States and others say, let us watch that place. That place has got huge potential. That's from a commercial trade point of view. From a strategic and tactical point of view as well, where Ethiopia sits, not far from with the Persian Gulf there and all those regions, it's strategically very important. It's of interest to other parties in the world as to who actually is in control in Ethiopia and what their attitude is. So they would tend to want to have military forces in Ethiopia or close by and various other influences. One must never forget the fact that their primary objective is their objective, not yours. They always come along and say, we've come here to help you for the good of you, but they haven't. They've come here to do something for you for the good of them. And this is not nasty. This is plain and simply how human beings are. You tend to do things in your own self-interest, which is not bad, as long as it's recognized, like with getting private enterprise to build the dam. The private enterprise is doing it in their own self-interest, but to do it for their own profit, they're going to do a good job as long as it's controlled by the referee. And this is the same principle. And I think it's taken a long time to start to learn these lessons. We must not look upon Africans as inferior people who don't know what they're doing. There's very many highly intelligent Africans who know exactly what they're doing. But we tend to get intimidated by believing that everybody who pitches up from Europe or America or somewhere who appears to know what they're doing must know more than us, but they don't, particularly when they come into our territory. When they come into our territory, we know a lot more about what to do here more than they do. We've had numbers of experiences here where foreigners come in with what appears to be a good solution, and you put it into practice and discover all sorts of things start to go wrong. We've got a bus service in Pretoria that was brought in from Europe. The bus stops are built to be snowproof. There's no snow here, but they brought the bus stops from Europe where they have to build them that the snow doesn't blow in on the passengers. So we have a snowproof bus shelters in Pretoria. This is the type of thing that happens when they tell you their system works, and they don't add for them. And you've got to say, but it must work for us. So that is a factor to bear in mind all the time.
Well, Doc, Africa has got independence some 50, 60 years ago, in 1960s, of course, in the African year. And Pan-Africanism developed, of course, many great heroes of African descent also from abroad contributed for Pan-Africanism. Is Africa now, capable enough to defend itself from imperial ambitions of the Western powers? Does this continent have the capability and the power, the leadership to do that? Do you think that?
Yes, you mentioned, Anwar, Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism is good, and one must not overdo it, though. Africa is a region because it happens to be connected together. But there are huge differences between the people as much as there's a lot of similarities. I've been saying there are a lot of factors in Ethiopia that are similar to South Africa, the dust and the distance and this, but the peoples are not the same. So one mustn't think that Pan-Africanism means everybody does everything the same way, ruled by the African Union. That's as bad having an AU. To my mind, we are seeing in Europe at the moment a lot of damage being done by the European Union. They're operating as if all European countries are the same. They're not. There's a huge difference between Greece and France and Germany and the Netherlands. And I think a lot of damage has been done by them trying to assume that this whole lot must all obey European Union rules that come out of the EU Parliament. I see the EU eventually falling apart. Britain has already pulled out on Brexit. I think others will follow suit soon. Having a common currency is maybe okay to a degree, but don't overdo it. Now, the same here. I would like to see us collaborate again on a private enterprise technical type of level. We need the cell phone systems to be compatible. We need the rail systems to be compatible. You mentioned earlier on the HTMR 100 nuclear reactor. That is a small nuclear reactor developed here in South Africa and currently privately owned. It's looking for finance to do further development, but the reactor is designed. Now, this reactor is 100 megawatts. It's perfect for all African countries. That's why it was designed like that. It does not need any water, and it's inexpensive. So you can put it wherever you like. If you want to put it near a mining town or near some industrial development, you can do it. I would like to see a lot of these reactors all over Africa connected into a network in a way in which we collaborate. Just like your airlines are internationally famous for being very good. But your airline people will collaborate with others so that you know how to fix the engines and you know how to train the pilots and all these sorts of things. You wouldn't want to go and do it so on your own that you try and develop your own engine repair techniques, because that's not going to work. You've got to trade ideas with everybody else, exchange parts, exchange information, and so on. We need to do the same thing with the energy network. And stop looking at these foolish ideas of wind and solar power and everything like that the Europeans tell you will work, but it's not yet working in Germany. So we need to look at something like that nuclear reactor network. And I would like to say that I recommend that Ethiopia plan for this now. The government of the day must say, let us walk towards a nuclear policy for the future, to have small nuclear reactors as the basis of our power, not wind turbines and solar panels that have to be placed hundreds of kilometers away from the user. Let's put small reactors where you want them, and let's connect to South African people and other African countries now with an exchange of information and a view to collaborating with similar systems. So I would really say that that is the type of Pan-Africanism you want, is collaboration on the technological fronts at work, but don't try and have a Pan-African rule, political rule, where you're telling everybody to toe the line. That'll be problematic.
Talking about energy, Doug, I recently read your one of your articles that was published this month. I only read some lines of that. It says Kelvin, Dr. Kelvin, breaks down the anti-nuclear theory and analysis, the need for small modular reactors, SMRs in Africa. Nuclear power is not new. It has been in operation for over half a century with an excellent record of providing reliable base load electricity. Not only has the electricity turned out to be reliable, but is also the safest, greenest, and the most inexpensive electricity currently available to mankind. What does that mean? And let me know that, and then we'll be back to Pan-Africanism again. I don't have a question to raise about it.
All right. Well, South Africa is a very old nuclear country. Our current nuclear establishment, the South African Nuclear Energy Corporation, known as NECSA, was actually founded in 1948 by an act of parliament, which was only 2 years after the American Atomic Energy Commission. So we've been involved with nuclear right from the very beginning. We have a large nuclear power station in Cape Town called Koeberg. It's the most southerly nuclear power station in the world, and it's been running for just about 40 years now. We have a nuclear reactor near Pretoria, which has been running for over 50 years now. A research reactor that produces nuclear medicine and produces silicon chips that go into your cell phones and things like that. So that is all there. The nuclear power that comes out of Koeberg is currently South Africa's cheapest electricity, by far, half the price of other electricity, less than half the price of wind and solar electricity. The anti-nuclear people say, oh, yes, but it's only cheap because you've paid off the capital cost of the buildings. There's a lot of truth in that, but that's why it was designed that way. When they built the reactor, we knew it was going to last for 40 years. Now they're going to extend the official life for 60 years plus. Current nuclear reactors are built for a minimum lifetime of 60 years and will probably last close to 100 years. Now, when you pay off your buildings and you pay off your initial capital costs, then you're cruising along for 20, 30, 40 years with very cheap electricity, with most of your expenses have been paid for. And that's terribly important in the planning. So it is the cheapest electricity. It's the safest. The only time in the history of nuclear power that any human beings have been killed was a nuclear accident in Russia called Chernobyl. And then less than 60 people died, including firemen and soldiers, people, the first responders that dashed into a burning fire to put the fire out and got nuclear radiation as a result. The Fukushima incident in Japan is internationally known. At Fukushima, not one single person died and not one single person was injured by nuclear radiation. To my mind, it was not a nuclear disaster. It was a conventional industrial accident that did huge financial damage to the company concerned and wrecked the plant. It was a very old plant anyway. So the anti-nuclear arguments are virtually all false. We know what we're doing with nuclear. It's safe, it's green, it's clean, it's all the things that you want. Now, the big nuclear, like the 2,000 to 4,000 megawatts, are expensive and they need water cooling. You have to put them on the coastline or next to very big dams. That's why South Africa developed the series called small modular reactors. And this one you mentioned, the HTMR 100, doesn't need water and it's small and you can put it anywhere you like. So there's a huge difference. So nuclear is under discussion now in Europe to include it officially in the green taxonomy, which says nuclear doesn't produce any carbon dioxide, which it doesn't, and therefore it's classified green. The anti-nuclear people are trying to say, no, it's not because there's nuclear waste. Of course, there's nuclear waste, but very, very little, and we know exactly how to handle it. Nuclear waste is not a problem. So it looks as if out of the COP26 in Edinburgh, nuclear has come out very well out of that people have realized out of COP26 that wind and solar will not work for large scale. Sure, if you've got a village somewhere and they want to put solar panels in the village to power some things for during the sunshine at lunchtime, do that. If there's some place where there's wind, put a wind turbine to pump water uphill into the dam. I've got no problem with that. But you're not going to run an electric train across Ethiopia on wind and solar, but you can on a nuclear power station. So the politics of the fight that has gone on for 50 years now around nuclear has ruled who puts nuclear where. It hasn't been good technological sense, but finally now in the last year or so, the technological sense is starting to make headway and it's getting its head above water. And some of the anti-nuclear green extremists, who all people in Europe and the United States and so on, you don't find anti-nuclear demonstrations in Ethiopia, I don't think. Or if you do, it's very little. So this attitude of why you should or shouldn't use nuclear is being told to us by people like the Germans, not being told to us by fellow Africans. So there's every reason for nuclear to be very successful in Africa, and it's the right way to do it.
Well, Doctor, about nuclear energy and also hydroelectric power, we'll talk some other times, I'm sure, because you are a nuclear physicist. Let
Yes.
me take you back again to the Pan-Africanism. Many political commentators recommend that working on the rebirth of Pan-Africanism is the best way to bring together African minds and liberate the continent from all forms of global domination and exploitation. Do you subscribe to this view, and do you think that the generation of the current African leaders are capable of making this reality, and are they Pan-Africanists? What's your reflection on this, sir?
Yes, they can, but what we want now is leaders that are thinkers and who really want to do good for the country. Unfortunately, over numbers of decades now, too many African leaders want to get into power like an ancient tribal king and say, once I'm here, I want to rule. You can't do that. It never works. That's why it never worked in Europe either. Over centuries, the kings one by one were executed and got rid of and so on. So there are no kings left anymore other than in a ceremonial role there. And this is something one has got to look out for. Again, I emphasize it's private enterprise, the businessmen, the traders, those are the people that should have the power and influence to get things done. The government is not going to get things done by itself. It's the referee. It can set the rules. They can tell you if you're stepping out of the field of play, and it's the referee, but it's not the coach. And the Pan-African movement can do that if the leaders who come in are intelligent. And one of the first things they say is, me and my immediate group is not going to be able to run this country. What we can do is find a whole lot of businessmen and traders and independent people, including the intellectuals who know what they really are talking about. There's a saying that says too that the more you get to know, the more you know what you don't know. Famously, Sir Isaac Newton, the famous physicist from way back in the 1600s who worked on gravitation and so on, near the end of his life, he said something, I don't remember the quote precisely, I feel like a small boy walking along the beach, where every so often I pick up a pebble of knowledge, but I see the whole ocean of understanding out there that I don't know. And that is so true. Now, there's far too many political leaders who get into power, then they think they're experts at everything and they know everything, and they're not. So the most important thing like that for a political leader is when he gets in the seat and he's in control, you must say, I know very little how to actually run a country. I must find the people who know how to do broadcasting, road building, rail building, electricity, water, this. Find them and leave them alone because they're the experts. Give them money, give them a contract, and get out of the way. Don't try and run everybody. And that is a really important thing. That's important. But yes, we need Pan-Africanism to stop the dominance and the control of others. Doesn't mean we must stop them coming in at all. You want to trade. The more you trade, the more economically beneficial it is. The more materials and stuff you send out of Ethiopia and others you bring in is good for trade. You need to double trade, but it must go both ways. You mustn't find yourself being only the supplier of raw materials and buying finished products, because then you become an economic slave and you're back to colonial times. It's just that the colonialism is now telling you what power source to use rather than telling you to make up your own mind.
In our off-the-record conversation, of course, I know and I understood that you believe in African solutions for African problems. And why that?
Yes.
Why not of Europe? Why not of America or other states?
There's a lot of things they get right, but I emphasize any human being thinks of a solution within their own personal experience. Men will look at something and say, I can look at a solution for that. The same comes with groups of people. If you go to Greenland where the Eskimos are and you ask them about house building, they know all about cutting blocks of ice and building igloos. The Bedouin Arabs in the middle of the Sahara Desert, they know nothing about that. They mustn't get building advice from the Eskimos into the Sahara, and vice versa. You don't want to get the Bedouin going to the igloos and telling the igloo people how to build the igloos better. Now, the same principle holds good now with these countries. I've been around countries in Europe and others, and I say, come and look at our advanced so-and-so system. And I look and I say to myself, good heavens, we do it better than them in South Africa. Quite often, if you say, but we do better than you, they can be quite offended. Say, but we're an important first world country. You're only an African from Africa. How can you be better than us? And I say, well, we do that better. I had an amusing incident happen to me in the United States a number of years ago. I was invited to give a presentation in a Senate investigation. So I went to the US Senate building there, and I arrived a bit early, and I was waiting for my turn to be called, and I was sending an SMS message on my cell phone back to my secretary in South Africa. And as I was sitting there doing this, it looked as if I was typing like a 20 or 30 number telephone number. You see, it looked as if I was battling to make a phone call. So one of the Americans there comes up and he says, "Say, buddy, can I help you with that call? You seem to be battling." So I said, "No, I'm not battling. I'm just sending a text message back to South Africa." So he says to me, "What's a text message?" And I said, "Well, look here." So I typed to him, "Is the sun shining in Pretoria today?" And 1, 2, 3 seconds later, my secretary sends back, "Yes, it is. What's the weather like in Washington?" And he couldn't believe it. South Africa had text messaging 2 years before the United States. Then that fellow turned around and shouted over his shoulder, "Hey, come and see what this guy can do with a cell phone to Africa." And before I knew it, I was demonstrating text messaging in the United States Senate. They'd never seen it before. And there we had this, and in South Africa, we thought, "Oh, great, this is a nice new thing." We'd had it for 2 years already. The US was 2 years behind us in text messaging. Africa has been particularly well advanced in cell phone banking because we have people way out in the bush. We have a term bundu here. I don't know if the word bundu is known in Ethiopia, meaning out in the bush. But out in the bush, people will be able to send a text message to their friend 300 kilometers away. "Please buy me some food or something and bring it up here on your next trip home." And the person says, "No problem, send me the money first." So now they've got the ability that you can send the money by cell phone. Africa was doing this well and competently long before Europe or the United States was doing this, because our circumstances alter it. There's numbers of other things like that because we face a particular problem, we solve it by using our brains, and there's nothing wrong with African people.
Let me ask you, Doc. Recently, I came up with Ethiopians rallied across even South Africa and other parts of the world to oppose foreign interference. Do you agree with that kind of saying? What do you understand about that?
There again, I'm saying again, we need to use the intellectuals and we need to use brain power, because yes, you have to oppose foreign interference, but you mustn't oppose foreign involvement in trade as long as you keep control in your own country. Don't let somebody come there and tell you how you must produce electricity. They can come and say, "We've got an option for you to consider," but your people must decide how you want electricity produced by looking at your circumstance, saying, what is the distance between our towns? What is the length of the power lines? If you look at an electricity network in Europe, you can pull up pictures on the internet of the network. The place is like an entire spider web of cables joining Europe up. If you take a map as big as an A4 piece of paper of Europe, you can't put your finger on that map that you don't put it on a power line or a power station or something like that. If you look at a similar map for Southern Africa or up your part of the world, there's huge gaps. You can put your finger all over the place and you're unlikely to even hit a power line. So the network is incredible. So there's actually no such thing as a German electricity grid or a French electricity grid. There's a pan-European grid. When the Germans are short of electricity, they automatically draw hydroelectricity from Germany. They draw nuclear power from France. When England needs electricity, it also pulls in nuclear power under the sea from France, and it pulls in hydropower under the sea from Norway. So they don't have a worry that their system ends at their border, but you do. You haven't got a system that if electricity fails in Ethiopia, you just press a button and some comes from Zambia or South Africa or the Congo. It's far too big and sparse for that to happen. So we would immediately think about electricity security for our country, whereas they don't. Them, the interlocking over the entire European space and right over into England and so on is so great that they are each other's insurance policy. So this is why when they often come with a very limited thinking, because it hasn't occurred to them that our electricity borders are completely different to theirs. So we must not let them take control, but you mustn't now have a paranoia that you're going to refuse any businessman who's coming from France or England or Germany or United States. Say, we're not going to let you because you're coming to dominate. You've got to check that he's coming to trade and genuinely work with you for mutual benefit. And the best people to do that with are the businessmen and the engineers and those sorts of people, because they're usually interested in them getting benefit because you get benefit. When you allow the political forces to come, they start telling you to do what's in the interest of their country. And so that's what you've got to watch out for.
Doctor, do you think that we can see a liberated, developed Africa in our lifetime, within a short period of time? Of course, the life is shorter, you know. Do you think that we see that kind of Africa?
I believe we can. You know, I'm an eternal optimist, and I think we can distinctly do that. But again, I emphasize that the political leaders must play the role of referee and get out of the game. They must say to the private enterprise, do something and get going, and allow individuals the freedom to develop their own businesses and to produce agricultural products or whatever and sell them wherever they like. There mustn't be rules that so hog-tie people that some small guy that can plant some crops and sell them is told that he's got to sell it to that person, he's got to sell it there at that price. Now, let him sell to whoever he likes, however he likes, as long as the stuff is grown within the rule. It mustn't be poisonous, it mustn't be rotten, it mustn't be all sorts of things. So you say the government will have rules on the quality of food, and when they've made rules on the quality of food, get out of the way. But yes, I think it can be. We just need, hopefully, Ethiopia's government evolves to a good one. I again mention your airlines. You got incredibly capable airlines. Everybody's always surprised that a country like Ethiopia has a world-leading airline that operates extremely well. And that's because the airline has been left alone to run an airline with qualified pilots and airline managers and so on. And that's the best thing you can do. You need to do that with the railways and the electricity system and the water system and the road development. And if you do that, then the president can largely sit back and have a comfortable drink with his friends and say, look how things are successful.
Do you have the plan to visit Ethiopia?
I haven't. I would love to be invited. I'd love to come and tour around your country. I've read about it for years, and also I say the history of how old it is, and it was never colonized, and it had the power to stand against the colonizers and so on at the time, and that's admirable. There were obviously people back then with brains. The brains are still there. They've been passed down the genetic line and so on. There's nothing wrong with the intelligence of the right people in the right place at the right time.
Also, what do you know about the current developments in Ethiopia? What have you heard?
No, I don't want to comment too much on that. As I say, I've read about it. I know bits and pieces, but I'd love you to tell me some of the developments. But I was suitably impressed at what was happening. So there's a lot more there than people tend to realize. So I know that the potential is there. That's why when you say, can we see a developed country in our lifetime? The answer is yes. Let it develop and don't interfere. If you let it develop and don't interfere, I imagine you'll see it in a short time. Things develop very fast once the rules allow for it. If you look at the development of London in the past and New York, who went from a little village on an island to the city, that was because they let people develop the way the people wanted to develop it with private enterprise. And so we can get 10 new cities the size of London in no time if you leave the business people in that to do it. They will find the right place to put the town and the right way to do it, and it'll look after itself. But I'd love you to fill me in on some of the Ethiopian developments that you'd like to comment about.
All right, Doctor, thank you very much indeed. Anything you may add, you may raise that I haven't asked you, which you think would be important for this very interview that we're having now, if there is something you add.
Well, I would just like to see peace and stability to come to your country as soon as possible, and then to have a government that deals with the private enterprise. I think the Ethiopian people are great. I've met a few in my life. There's some in South Africa that I meet. And overall, they're very, very nice people and very competent. I've got no doubt that there's huge amount of untapped brain power in the country, not just the people that are formally educated, but a lot of other people that haven't had the opportunity of formal education are bright. They're very capable if you give them an opportunity to show what they can do. So I don't think there's anything that should cause you to stand back. You must stand your place in the world and say, we know what we're doing. Help us by giving us advice, but don't tell us what to do. We'll make our own decisions. And I think there's a rosy future for Ethiopia.
Wow, Doctor, thank you for your time. I'm sure I'll join you in some other times on nuclear energy and other energy sources that Africa has got and should work on. And you are a specialist in nuclear energy, so nuclear physicist you are. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate.
Well, Anwar, I'm most honored that you invited me. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and I wish you and your group there all the best and all the success. So thank you once again.
Dear viewers, I've been talking to Dr. Kelvin Kemm from the Republic of South Africa. He's a nuclear physicist. He talked about the African unity or unity of the continent of Africa, Pan-Africanism, about economic development of the country, especially on energy sector, and also told us about the African solutions for African problems. And that he said Africa should work on energy sector to get independence and also to be independent from others. He also opposes the intervention of foreigners in African issues, in African affairs. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.